When household video games first came out in the late 70s and early 80s, they were simple and fun. Consoles like the Atari 2600, the Odyssey 2, and the Intellivision gained popularity as they spread across the world and opened the new field of video gaming. Despite only having relatively simple games compared to modern standards, they offered people a way to pass time playing in game worlds instead of spending time in reality. As video games evolved, new, complex, and more realistic worlds sprung up. As time progressed through the late 2000s and early teens, games like Minecraft were released and soared in popularity. Minecraft was a simple game, yet something about it appealed to such a large audience. What was so appealing, you ask? It was the concept, an open virtual world where you could build whatever you want, do whatever you want, and be whoever you wanted to be. All of a sudden, people could play in a world where they were not confined by the barriers within their real life, but were finally free. As time moved on, and the real world cruised through the teens, video game worlds were becoming even more realistic, and the line between fiction and reality was blurring. However, as video games became more complex and realistic, they reached a point where they were real enough to be seen as an alternate world. Over the course of history, people have always looked for an escape from reality. As Mary Capello, an author and professor at the University of Rhode Island, notes, escape is an ancient word, escapism a modern one. Video games in modern times have become a new way for people to escape reality. The problem is, the effects are much more devastating. In older times, people might turn to literary works as a way to escape. But literary works were limited in that they contained pre-written worlds that could not be altered by the reader. Video games, however, offered open-ended worlds that relied on and changed according to the interaction with the user. This truly allowed video games to take a step further and become alternate worlds for people, and their open-endedness led to people spending more and more time playing video games. Everyone faces problems and challenges in their lives, but before video games it was a lot harder to avoid them, and people had to face them if they wanted a more pleasant reality. But with the rise of modern video games, people could keep themselves permanently distracted, focusing all their free time and energy into video games and avoiding the painful and hard truths of reality. As video games became more and more advanced and the video game market expanded, new video game companies were growing in size to accommodate the challenges of making realistic game worlds. In one sense, this improved video games because large teams of game designers were able to make some of the most amazing and realistic-looking game worlds. On the other hand, this presented a new challenge, keeping the game companies profitable. As investors and stockholders pressed video game companies for increased profits, video game companies realized that they would need income from an additional source besides the initial sales of their video games. With this came the modern monetization of video games. Suddenly, some in-game items could only be obtained with real-world money. Now consumers would have to pay not only for the game itself, but also for in-game items as well if they wanted to progress through the video game. This new way of designing video games gave video game companies a greedier mindset and led them to care less about their consumers and more about their profits. The modern use of video games as an escape from reality, along with the rise of greedier video game companies that capitalize on this, can be seen in the movie Ready Player One. Released in 2019, Ready Player One is a movie directed by Steven Spielberg that is based off a popular book with the same title. As a quick heads up, there are spoilers ahead, so just be aware of that in case you want to watch the movie first, which I highly recommend. Anyway, the general plot of the movie centers around a teenage kid named Wade Watts living in the year 2045. In his time, a virtual world has been created, called the Oasis, in which people interact with it through virtual reality gear, such as special goggles, gloves, and omnidirectional treadmills. It has become so real that most of society in the world has given up on trying to solve the world's problems and has just moved towards spending their time as avatars in the Oasis. This has led to many people living in poverty while the earth is dying. The story begins to get underway when it is revealed that the creator and owner of the Oasis, James Halliday, has died. After his death, the world is shown a pre-recorded message stating that ownership of his virtual world will be given to the first player that finds a golden Easter egg hidden somewhere in the Oasis. The message states that the egg is hidden behind a gate that requires 3 keys, which can be obtained through a series of challenges left behind in different places present in the virtual world. Many people go after the egg, including both the main character, Wade, and his friends, as well as a large, greedy tech corporation known as IOI that wants to seize control of the Oasis to increase its profits. The first challenge is to win a race that is impossible to win. While everyone struggles for years to win the race, eventually, Wade finds an out-of-the-box solution to winning the race and in doing so acquires the first key. The IOI Corporation soon follows suit, and it becomes a race between the main characters and the IOI Corporation to see who can complete the challenges first and take ownership of the virtual world. After a ton of virtual battling and a few real-life assassination attempts, Wade and the rest of the main characters win and take ownership of the virtual world, banishing the evil tech corporation and deciding to close the world on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that people spend time living in their real lives. In this video, I will examine how the virtual world of the Oasis, along with the greedy tech company IOI and scenes showing the real world in 2045, all reflect the modern issue of escapism, along with the rise of greedy video game companies that capitalize off it. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Oasis is a virtual world created by James Halliday. It contains literally everything, from vacation worlds, to casinos, to hardcore shooter games. But what makes the Oasis so appealing to people is not just all the worlds it offers, but also all the things a person can be within the Oasis. The avatars in the Oasis are completely customizable, allowing a person to be whatever gender, age, or even species they want to be. This, combined with all the different worlds a person can go to, allows people to become truly free from the limitations of reality they face outside of the Oasis. This freedom of both world choice and avatar choice reflects what modern video games offer the world today. In modern video games such as Minecraft, Fortnite, and Roblox, the same features demonstrated in the Oasis are also present. Each of these games offer their own 3D virtual worlds in which players can both customize their avatars and interact with millions of other players. In this way, the Oasis directly represents what modern video games offer to society, and it establishes a connection with the viewer because the viewer immediately recognizes the Oasis as a familiar virtual atmosphere similar to the ones present in modern video games. The second way the Oasis can be seen as a reflection of modern video games is in how much time, effort, and money people invest in it. In Ready Player One, the people of society are constantly pouring everything they have into their virtual lives in the Oasis. The main character, Wade Watts, usually plays in the virtual world from morning to night, spending none of his daytime hours actually developing his real life. Furthermore, Wade's step-uncle spends and loses all the money his family was saving for a real-life house on in-game power-ups within the Oasis. In many ways, this reflects the modern world in which people spend days, months, and even years of their life playing video games, and how people also spend a lot of money on in-game items within video games. Just think about this for a second. If you spend on average 3.5 hours playing video games over the course of a week, then every year that amounts to over 2 weeks of daylight hours spent playing video games. And every 4 years, that equates to 2 months worth of time you're never going to get back. Ready Player One takes this concept to the extreme, where we as the viewers see how people's virtual lives in the Oasis mean more to them than their real lives, such that when they lose their stuff in the Oasis, many attempt suicide in real life. The antagonist of the story is the company Innovative Online Industries, or IOI, and its CEO, Norman Sorrento. Together they represent what large modern video game companies have become and the mindset they've turned to. Over the course of the movie, we as the viewers are shown how IOI is 100% profit-oriented and how they capitalize on people's desire to escape into the Oasis. IOI sells things like virtual reality equipment, such as suits, gloves, and goggles that offer to make the virtual experience better and higher quality. This directly represents modern companies that do the same thing, such as video game companies that offer in-game items for real money, and companies that sell gaming equipment such as consoles, headsets, and controllers. IOI also reflects large, real-world companies and how it cares more about its profit than the health of its consumers. In Ready Player One, IOI commits many illegal crimes, such as blowing up people and houses in the real world and illegally detaining people against their will, all because those people get in the way of their profits. While this is a very extreme representation, it still does reflect real-world technology and gaming companies that often make games that are highly addictive for players in order to keep players coming back to their game so they can make more money off their game. In doing so, these companies neglect the health of the people playing their games, seeing as studies have shown that children who have increased screen time are more likely to have poor sleep quality. As modern video game companies encourage people to play video games more and more, they decide not to value the health of their consumers, but instead focus solely on their profit. While much of the storyline of Ready Player One takes place in the Oasis, a portion of it also takes place in the real world. Scenes showing the real world focus on how many people are living in poverty and how the earth is dying because people have stopped taking care of it. When the audience sees the real world, it is depicted as run down and near collapse. The air is dark and hazy from pollution, and everyone's homes are packed really close together. Furthermore, all real-world relationships between people are shown to be stressed and dysfunctional. Scenes of the real world in Ready Player One reflect what happens to personal lives of people who use video games as an escape from reality in our world today. When virtual video game worlds become more important to a person than the world they live in, it results in a deterioration of their real life. People stop maintaining their relationships with the people in the world around them and even neglect their physical and emotional health. The scenes of real life in Ready Player One also reflect the terrible extreme cases of what will happen if people continue to use video games to escape. In Ready Player One, characters freak out and react terribly if their avatar gets killed in the Oasis and they lose their progress. While some people just get really upset, others go as far as to attempt suicide. This reflects how virtual video game worlds are both fragile and impermanent, and how it is dangerous to treat them as reality when they simply aren't reality. This also serves as a warning that getting too attached to virtual game worlds can be dangerous, and it is important for people not to give up on reality. Alright, so what have we learned from all this? Well, we've learned that modern video games have become a source for escapism in the world today because of how realistic and complex they have become. We saw how this is reflected in Ready Player One through the virtual world of the Oasis, which, similar to modern video games, allows the player to choose both the world they want to be in and what kind of character they want to be. Through the movie's antagonist, IOI led by its CEO, Nolan Sorrento, Ready Player One references modern video game corporations and how they focus more on profit than on the health and safety of their consumers. By showing scenes of the real world and how people's lives are being affected by their choice to escape into the Oasis, Ready Player One also shows the audience what can happen when people try to escape reality rather than improve it. Through all of this, Ready Player One shows us the importance of staying in touch with reality and maintaining healthy, positive relationships with the people around us. It also warns us about the dangers of becoming too caught up in the modern video games we play, which can cause us to lose sight of things that really matter in reality. It calls for video games to be used as a fun way to connect with other people, not as a way to avoid problems and fuel the greed of large video game corporations. It is important for us to be aware of all this as we lead our lives today, so that we can balance the different aspects of our lives and make the most of our time here on Earth. While it's true that reality is hard and not always fun or easy to face, we must bravely stand and face it so that our world can improve and become a better place. If we don't face the hard truths of our reality, then they will never change. But if we stand our ground and choose not to run from reality, we can find fulfillment in improving our own lives and the lives of the people around us.
Now that was when I realized that as terrifying and painful as reality can be, it's also the only place that you can get a decent meal.